Hello, everyone, and welcome to the start of a brand new type of series where we will be making a FPS RPG game. Now, a lot of you have been asking for us to revisit the FPS RPG series and carry on where we left off, but what we're going to do is something a little bit different with this one. So, in this one, we are making a game. We're going to make it work towards a game and work towards a game design document and work towards actually the whole workflow of putting a game together. And the game is called currently Legends of Mur, and it is an FPS RPG set in a fantasy world. So the player plays as a normal human, but they have to contend with like orcs, demons, goblins, all these other things like this. And so that is the kind of game. There's a lot more to reveal about the game in time, but we're not going to worry about that just yet. So in this first episode, we're going to go through the process of where we start off, where we start making the game. So what do I do when I first get into a project? What am I first looking at trying to achieve? And where do we actually begin? So what we actually do begin is we can set up our dev level and start working on our character's movement in our level and space. So let's get started. So we're going to start off with our game and making a dev map. Now, dev map is a great place for you to develop your game in before you worry about anything like level design or encounter design, anything like that. It's a place where you can get the fundamentals built into your game in a very easy to test space. And when you're loading up Unreal Engine for the first time, you get a template level like this, for example. This is a great starting block for our test environment. So we'll be using this as our test environment, and we'll be using the first person template to get started for our FPS RPG. Now, in this game, we're going to focus on a few things. First of all, we're going to focus on the character's movement, their controls, and their camera. So there's a few things we want to tweak in here, because so far we've got some pretty okay things for those three aspects based upon the template they give you. But let's get those a bit more solid and in the way we want to work. So for our FPS RPG, we want to have our character able to sprint. We want them to be able to jump. We want them to be able to crouch. There's all these various elements that we want them to be able to do. And it's important that when you're designing a game that you come up with what these elements are before you set off in this. Now, the way I'd like to work in creating a whole game is we'll create a separate folder for the actual game. So I'll leave all the assets that I've imported in where they are. And so we'll make a new folder here, and we'll call this one the game folder. And I usually like to color this one, so it's a lot easier to see and stand out. We'll go for a nice turquoise. Okay. So in here, we want to put in the things that our game is actively using that we are also editing and messing about with. So you'll find that your first person folder is going to be useful for this, because this has the blueprints that you have for your first person template, as well as the input actions that we're using here for this. So we're going to copy that whole folder, or not copy it, but move it into our game folder here. So I'm going to move that over to there. And okay. Okay, and there's our first person folder. So in our first person character here, this is our main player character. And we want to first of all set them up so they can run, jump, sprint, crouch, all the various things that we would expect them to be able to do. So just notice that this is facing the wrong way. Let's just fix that. Oh, no, it was facing the right way. It's just animation weren't loaded. There you go. So yeah, to make a character be able to crouch, we need to go to character movement component and search for crouch. And you'll make sure it's turned on. So can crouch is turned on. And the benefit of using this crouch method is because it will automatically adjust the collision and everything else related to the collision, and like the camera height, for you. So it's really easy to put in. So all we're going to do is create the input action for our crouch behavior. So we go to input folder, actions, and let's create a new input for IA crouch. And we don't have to do anything in here, so we can just save it and close it. And we're going to go put that into our context on the IMC default context. And in here, you'll find all your mappings. You've got jump, move, look, and we're going to add our crouch to it. So click on the plus icon next to mappings, and where it says none, change that to IA crouch. expand it open, and this is where you can set what key you want to use when you are crouching. So I'm going to set this to the control key, and whilst I'm here, I'm also going to add the controller input for this as well. And I'm going to set this to the gamepad face button right. So if you're on an Xbox controller, that's the B button, and that'll be useful for crouching. And we'll have it like that. Okay, so in our event graph, we can now add our IA crouch. And we are going to, when it is triggered, determine whether we're crouching or uncrouching. So we'll make it like a held key. So you have to hold down the key when you're crouching. But we could probably put in a setting later on to make the player change that if we want to. But for now, we'll make it so you can hold it. So crouch is going to be on started. And then when it is cancelled and completed, we're going to do uncrouch. So you want that cancelled and completed. Compile and save that. So here we are, and we've got crouching in our game. So to test crouching in a game dev sense, where we want to test it for level design purposes, we're going to put in an area that we have to crouch under. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this block here, and I'm just going to change the snaps here to make life a little bit easier. There we go. And I'm going to just move that across like here, scale it down, and bring it up like so. And we'll make this like a little bridge. We can test here. So I want the player to not be able to crouch under this gap because that's quite small. Yeah. So we're looking at always testing what we think is a good enough space. So 1 meter, which is what the size is of these grid lines we're seeing here, is not enough. But it looks like 1.5 might be where you wanted to go. So let's change that to 1.5. So I'm going to just change the scale here to 0.5, scale it down to half, and move it up by 50. Now let's just test that and see how that behaves for us. And that's looking very nice there. But if you don't want to make it so that the crouch has to fit underneath a taller gap like this one, you could make the crouch actually smaller. So if I return that back down to like there, for example, and I want to actually crouch underneath that, if I go into my player character, go to the character movement and search for crouch, and as you can see, our half height here is 40. Now the gap that was there is 1 meter. So if half height is 40, that means our total height is 80, which should fit perfectly underneath that gap there, but it isn't. Why is that? Well, the funny thing about capsules is that when you change the half height of it, the minimum the half height can be is the same as the radius. So if I go to the capsule rate component here, and you'll see in here capsule radius is set to 55. That means the smallest the half height could ever be is going to be 55, which means 110 in total, which is greater than 1 meter. So we need to make our capsule radius a little bit thinner to be able to crouch a bit lower. So I'm going to change my 55 here down to 40, and you'll see you've got a thinner capsule now. Hit compile and save, and let's see how that behaves with this little gap here. So now when I go up to crouch underneath this obstruction, I can fit underneath it, but as you notice, the camera does clip through the obstacle still. And we really want to try and get it underneath that obstacle. So I'm going to lower the camera a little bit. Now, the camera does get lowered somewhat by the automatic crouch system, but it's not going to be enough. So what we need to do is tell our crouch here to manually change the location of our camera for ourselves. So I'm going to take the camera component, and we're going to do set relative location. And the relative location you want to set to is going to be whatever it is currently. So currently it's the location sets -10 and 60. So we're going to do -10 in the X, and then in the Z for crouching 60. So we're going to go down to let's say 40. And then I'm going to do the same thing for uncrouch. I'm going to put it back up to 60. Okay, so let's take a look at that now. So my camera does look a lot lower now, and that looks a lot better. I can crouch underneath here just fine, and things are looking a lot nicer going underneath that. Now, it isn't smooth, the animation of this, but more on that in due time. I just want to make sure we got the movement in there correctly, working as intended. So that is crouching. But what about sprinting? So let's go in and add a sprint to our character. So once again, we're going to go into our input settings and we're going to have actions, and we're going to create an input for IA sprint. And going to go back to our default context and add the mappings for IA sprint. And that's going to be left shift for this. And for gamepad, it's going to be gamepad left thumbstick button. And that's like pushing down. That's a button on your left thumbstick. Yeah, we'll do that. Close that. Okay, so crouching's done. But sprinting, this is a little bit different because there is no built-in method for our character to sprint. So what you're technically going to do is you have an enhanced input action sprint here, and then you're going to have two functions, one for start sprinting, one for stop sprinting. So we go to functions, we do start sprint, and another one for stop sprint. And in the start sprint, we're just going to change the speed of the character by going into character movement component, and from there doing set max walk speed to our sprint variable. Now for this, we need to promote that to a variable and call it sprint speed, and compile it and set the sprint speed here to something faster than 600. I think it's 500 by default, but nonetheless, we'll set it to something like 900. Okay, so it's a lot faster. And then we're going to copy all this and go to stop sprint and paste it in there. But this time, we're not going to use sprint speed. We're going to create another variable called walk speed. I do believe it's set to 500, so I'll just change the default value here to 500. Compile, save. So now we've got those two functions. Now there is a lot more we're going to add to these in time. The trick is the way you're developing a game is through like layering. So you're just doing iterations of each thing. So you're getting the core functionality in first, and then you go through making it nicer. So on the sprint here, when it started, we're going to do start sprint. And when it is cancelled and completed, we'll do stop sprint. And we can save that. So now, when I hold down shift, my character runs faster. I've got crouch, shift, all good. Excellent. Okay, brilliant. So next thing we're going to do is work on our character's jumping. So at the moment, the jumping is not too bad. We kind of like this jumping. It's not too bad at all, actually. As we still want it to not be super hyper realistic. We still want some movement in the character. But one thing actually I might actually do is tweak the speed of the character. Look, it's quite slow. So let's tweak the overall speed of the character. I think that's going to really help this out. So I'm going to go character movement. I'm going to go into my max walk speed, set to from 600. We'll set it to like 800 by default. And I'm going to go to walk speed down in my variables, change that to 800. And sprint speed will increase to something like 1300. So I still want it to be quite a fairly fast-paced game. So there is our character's walk speed, sprint speed, and yeah, looking good. And so this is what we're doing. We're just going around testing our environment and looking at what we want to get from it. So I want to get the jump better. So at the moment, I want to be able to jump on top of this obstruction here. At the moment, I can't do that. So let's take a look at how we can achieve that. First of all, we're going to go into our character movement, and we're going to tweak the jump strength. So you go down to jump Z velocity on the character movement component. You see it's 420 by there. We'll change that to 680 and see what that feels like. Now, one thing side effect of doing this is it can make things feel a bit floaty. So you notice that's a bit floaty. Okay. And that is fixed by just changing the gravity scale on the character movement. So if we go to character movements gravity scale, I'll change it to 1.6. When I do this though, the jump height is going to be affected by this. It won't be able to go as high up. It'll pull down to the ground quicker, which is nicer, but the height is lost some of its height there. It's not too bad for us in this case. We can still get on top of this platform, but I want a little bit of extra height on that, I think. So we're going to compensate for that by going down to jump head velocity and just adding a little bit more to this. Let's try 750. And this is the benefit of doing like a dev level like this, because it's very easy to quickly test gameplay without having to load up big expensive maps that take ages to load, or take ages to get to places that you want to test. So we've got this sort of thing going on here just fine, which is all good. Okay, that's looking nice there. We'll check our gap jumps. Yep, not too bad there at all. Brilliant. So in our game, our character's going to have lots of other movement abilities, but we'll worry about those in another video way down the line. We're not worried about those at all just yet. As I say, this is going to be a long process. We're just going to keep building on top of this, creating our FPSRPG. But yeah, there we go. So there you go. We've now got the very basic first step of our game coming together. And as we continue to work on the Legends of Mur, we're looking at adding a lot more features, a lot more systems as we come to filling the game out with a lot more RPG elements and FPS elements. And kind of the game we're kind of looking for is kind of a mix between like Destiny and Zelda, Metroid type game. Okay, so that's something to look forward to, something to be excited for as well. I'm looking forward to getting to work on it, and yeah, I think it'd be good fun to share that process. So if you want to see the next part, you can head over to patreon.com/Ryan Laley, where you can find all my videos early from just $1 a month. Thank you so much to everyone who has been supporting the channel so far over there. And if you want to support the channel, head over there. There's loads of things to get as part of being a Patreon, including access to our Creator Challenge every single month, where you can get feedback on your work that you're completing for the channel. So make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.